My name is Kevin Ward. I'm the program director of the Sports Animal Radio Network and ESPN in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm also the sports ministry deacon at the Park Church of Christ in Tulsa. I've been involved in radio sports for the better part of 30 years and have served as a deacon at the park for the past decade and at the Guthrie Church of Christ for many years before that. Suit Up has been prayed about for many, many years, and I believe it is inspired by the Spirit to tell faith stories from people involved in sports. I'm also thankful to the Park Church of Christ for believing in this ministry. Sherri Coale is approaching 500 career wins as the women's basketball coach at the University of Oklahoma, which makes her the winningest coach in OU history, men or women. And she's one of the most successful coaches in women's history, having led the Sooners to 3 Final Four appearances, 19 straight trips to the tournament before the streak ended this past season. She's coached for our country in the Junior World Championships and World University Games and is the current president of the K-Yow Cancer Fund. She loves her hometown of Hilton, Oklahoma, her family, coaching, and more importantly, she loves the Lord. Her story is coming up on this episode of Suit Up.
This is Mitch Wilburn, preaching minister at the Park Church of Christ, proud sponsor of Suit Up. I'd like to extend an invitation to you to join us for worship at the park. We're a Bible-based church that loves the Lord and loves people. We have one service on Sunday morning at 9 a.m., and that's followed by classes for everyone, from newborn to 100 years of age. The park sits on a rather large lot near the corner of Garnett and the Creek Turnpike, and offers a Sunday evening service at 6 p.m., and Wednesday night we meet at 7 p.m. Our youth have their own building with multiple men and women leading them, and our kids, age 1 to 5th grade, have their own educational wing that even has its own working carousel and ice cream parlor. And I love both. Kevin, the host of this podcast, is in charge of our sports ministry that goes on all year round with basketball, volleyball, softball, great activities. So come see us at the park on the corner of Garnett and the Creek Turnpike, or check us out on the web at parkplaza.org.
What I'd like to do is just kind of start with growing up in Hilton and talk about life in Hilton, growing up with the one older brother, and then also maybe go into how, basketball became a part of your life growing up.
Well, I say, meaning as respectfully as possible, that Hilton is a great place to be from. And I mean that because when you grow up there, you are really, truly raised by a community because everybody knows everybody else. And it's a one-stop-like town. And everybody rallies around the sports teams. And if you go to school there, you sing in the choir, whether you can sing or not. And you have a role in the school play, whether you can act or not. And you just get involved. And the great benefit, in my opinion, from growing up in a small town is you leave and you believe that you can do anything because you've done a little bit of everything. And I think that there is a tremendous sense of earned confidence that comes from having to do things, whether they're necessarily in your talent lane or not, but finding a way to add to whatever it is that you're a part of. And just there were so many great people in my church, in my school, in the community that just made such an incredible impact on the person that I've become. It's amazing, really, when you look back to the circle of friends. I have a nice little circle of girlfriends that we graduated together that stay in touch. And to this day, we live here, and most of us live here in Oklahoma. And the roots are really strong. And we got together a couple of months ago, and we're talking about the impact that the sets of parents had on one another. And it's just it's a blessing to grow up in a small town, there's no doubt.
We know about basketball, and you earned a scholarship to Oklahoma Christian, what was Oklahoma Christian College back then. But did you play any other sports? And I guess Hilton is a small enough school, you probably did.
Oh, yes. I was the lead leg on every relay for the track team, and we actually won a state championship in track. I played softball in the summer. We didn't have it at school, but I played fast pitch and slow pitch. And then the rest of my time I spent dribbling and shooting outside on the concrete driveway with a slanted concrete driveway where the free throw line was the right distance to the goal, but a layup was a little shorter. You had to figure out where you're going to give. Did you want to give in the perimeter, or did you want to give near the rim? Because the driveway was slanted and it was going to stay that way. But it was a great experience, and I used to shoot baskets outside my granny's house up the quote-unquote court that I'm just describing, and she lived kind of on a hill, and so if it was a long rebound and it got away from you, it went down the hill and across the street, and it was quite a trek to go retrieve it. So you got really good at following your shot. There were all kinds of blessings that came out of that.
With all the sports that you played, was that because of having an older brother? Were your parents active when they were younger in sports as well, or was it just growing up in a small community that's all there was?
I think more than anything, it was growing up in a small community. My brother played baseball and played a little bit of basketball, but baseball was his main sport. And my mother never really participated in sports. I'm not sure she had the opportunity growing up in Houlton when she did. My father played some football and baseball when he was growing up in Duncan, Oklahoma. But it wasn't really my parents that got me into sports. There were a couple of girls who were my brother's age, he was 3 years older than me, who were basketball players. One of the girls' mothers was the coach at the junior high level. And those girls really took me under their wing. They would let me go to the gym with them on Saturdays. And, I just thought that was the coolest thing ever because I got to hang out with girls who were 3 years older than me. But they were gym rats, quintessential gym rats back in the day. They loved to play, and they were terrific to me, and I just caught the bug really from them. They took me to a basketball camp over at Plainview, which is right outside of Ardmore, Oklahoma. And from there, I ended up going to Lindsay All-Star camps with Coach Hately every single summer from the time I was in 5th grade until I finished my senior year in high school. And most of my close friendships revolved around the sport of basketball. I just fell in love with it. And I think it was partly because I could play it by myself. I could work on it by myself. I could work on my dribbling. I could work on my shooting. I didn't have to have somebody catch or throw to me. And then I also think it was just the group of people. Those people who taught me how to play were the people I most wanted to be like in the world.
Given some of what you've already said, can assume that you grew up in a Christian household. Did you go to church camps? Were that ever a part of your summers growing up?
No, I did not go to church camp. Everybody went to Sooner Youth Camp, but I was playing basketball, practicing, going to basketball camp, working on my game. By the time I got old enough to make those decisions about summer camps, I was completely into basketball with both feet, and I played summer softball as well and traveled around. But yes, we grew up in a Christian household where we went to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. And if it snowed and the roads were bad, you put on your boots and walked. It was that kind of household, and I am so grateful for that.
All right, so let's fast forward. We got that scholarship to Oklahoma Christian. That's where actually I met you. I know you remember that, but a lot of people probably don't even know that we were at Oklahoma Christian at the same time. I was on my way out of college as you were starting your career there. And I knew
Thank you for clarifying that. I don't want people to get the idea that we're the same age.
Oh, absolutely not. No. And I met your husband, Dane. He wasn't your husband at the time because he played baseball at Oklahoma Christian, and my roommate was a baseball player, so I knew most of those guys. How did you two meet, and what was it about Dane that captured your heart?
Well, Dan Hayes takes full credit for that. Dan Hayes, the longtime basketball coach at Oklahoma Christian, he was running the Letterman's meeting, which you have at the start of every semester in the fall. And, of course, as returning athletes, the campus is pretty small, and you know pretty much everybody. And every year that's an opportunity to see who's new and who's in the mix, who's transferred in. And most often it was baseball guys. And Dan had actually known Dane at Northwestern because Dan came to Oklahoma Christian from Northwestern in Alva. And Dane had played baseball at Northwestern and transferred to Oklahoma Christian. So before he even got there, Dan said, I got this guy I want you to meet. And we laugh a lot. Coach Finley, Stephanie Finley, my coach, and Jan and I laugh a lot because we get the list and go through and decide who had a potentially good name, and we thought the name Dane held potential. So he was in a column of people we wanted to check out that first night at the Letterman's Club meeting.
Well, now, if I remember right, and I haven't seen Dane in a while, but I haven't seen a lot of people from OC in a long, long time, but he was a good-looking dude. Didn't he have some blonde curls and had that whole thing going?
Yeah, doesn't have quite as many blonde curls anymore.
So what was it about Dane, though, besides being a good-looking guy, that really swept you off your feet?
Well, obviously, I think as most relationships that stand the test of time, we shared a fundamental faith. He had been raised in the church as well, and there's so many like experiences, Kevin, that just immediately connect you. Everything from the songs you sang at Vacation Bible School to the ability to sing four-part harmony in a church service to the way that you pray. There's just so many commonalities, and we connected on so many fronts in terms of our faith. But I think also he was very independent, very low maintenance, very in a baseball player's truest personality, chill. He just had the patience. I think that sport is a sport of patience, and he had the patience of Job and still does. And so in that way, we were, I guess, a little bit different. I'm wound very intense, like a basketball player, and he's a little bit more chill. But just his ability, I think, to take care of himself and to handle situations and to be independent. That's always been a strength of our relationship, and it's made it much easier as you go through the changes and the times of life with small children, and when children are older and then out of the nest, to be able to weather those with a partner who's patient.
I'm going to back up a little bit here. You mentioned Stephanie Finley, who was your head coach at Oklahoma Christian, and I got there just shortly after she and then her husband, Dean, who also played at OC a little bit. So did Stephanie. But I spent a lot of evenings over at their house playing Stratomatic baseball back in the day. But what was it about Oklahoma Christian and Stephanie that lured you to Oklahoma Christian to play in the first place?
Well, actually, the head coach was Max Dobson when I was in high school. I played for Max my freshman year, and he's the one that recruited me. And I think for lack of a better explanation, probably my entire life when I have to make a really tough decision, I have thought, what would Max do? Because I just looked at Max Dobson as the ultimate Christian decision maker. I just thought of him as being the pattern of what you wanted your husband to be like, what you wanted the father of your children to be like. Max and Ramona were just amazing role models to all of us who played at Oklahoma Christian. Just their family and the way they treated one another and the way they treated people and their commitment. It was what you modeled yourself after. And, really, Kevin, while my education at Oklahoma Christian was fantastic, I cannot say enough how challenging academically that institution was, and I'm sure it still is. It stretched me in every way academically. But the greatest takeaway was not what I learned there in terms of class content. It was the myriad of Christian examples that were there for us. When I left, I wanted to teach English like Dr. Darrell Tippins taught English, and I wanted to coach basketball like Dan Hayes. I wanted to build a team like Stephanie Finley, and those people were just my heroes and still are to this day. And I feel like that was the greatest advantage from getting a college education there and playing NAI level basketball, as it was an NAI level school at that time. The greatest blessing were the people, and Max and Stephanie chief among them. And Max is not in great health these days, and we've lost Ramona. But Steph is still a dear, dear friend, and she and I talk regularly and love her as a family member.
Let me ask you about some of those influences. And by the way, I wish I would have been half as mature as you were in college. Probably would have served me a lot better in my mid to late 20s. But As it is, I think I've turned out okay, but it probably could have avoided some things along the way. So let me ask you about those influences, because, already a Christian woman in college, and you had an idea of the type of man you wanted to marry, and you wanted them to be of like mind, and you talk about those influences at Oklahoma Christian from both a personal standpoint and from a coaching standpoint. When did you know that you wanted to be a coach?
I figured that out when I was in Healton. My high school basketball coach was Mary Patton, and she was who I wanted to be when I grew up. She was a wife. She was a mother. She taught English. She coached our basketball team, and I just thought there wasn't a cooler person on the planet. The way she handled herself, the way she approached all of her duties and activities. And at that time, I think probably what she was doing was a little bit rare, the balancing of the professional and personal life. But it never felt like that to me, because that's what I was surrounded by. And so I thought that would just be an amazing life. I couldn't imagine not being in the gym every day. And I love the written word. I love sentences. I love everything about literature and grammar and writing. And so I thought, teach what you know best, and get to be in the gym every day and get to hopefully influence young people the way that she influenced me. So I went to Oklahoma Christian with the idea that I'm going to get an English degree, and I want to coach high school basketball and teach. And so I was a weird kid, Kevin. At my fifth grade book fair, They Call Me Coach by John Wooden. I bought the paperback book. I still have it. I got him to sign it years ago. But that's what, people are buying, mysteries and pop-up books, and I'm buying They Call Me Coach by John Wooden. So I was a weird kid.
There'll be some other peculiar things that we'll bring up here in a minute when you became the coach at Oklahoma. But let's go back, because you've had some really hard decisions to make. One of them was leaving the successful program at Norman High School that you had built, and especially in the last 2 years as the head coach there, when you were 53-2, you'd won 2 state titles, to go coach at Oklahoma, which people look at Oklahoma University now and they see all the success you've had as the head coach there, and they forget about what happened 25 years ago, or almost happened, when the program almost went away. So you had to make a decision, do you want to go there? And then through the process of the successes that you've had at Oklahoma, and also some of the heartbreak with losing a former player along the way back about 8 years ago or so, how did you rely on your faith and that relationship with God to pull you through a lot of those decisions and those difficult times?
Well, that's a loaded question with a long answer, but I'll start with the thing you started with, which is the jump from Norman High to the University of Oklahoma. I had never, while I was a rampant goal setter, I had my goals taped inside my royal blue locker at Healton High School when I was growing up. I wanted to go to state. I wanted to be an all-stater, and I wanted to get a full ride to college. I had it in my locker every day. I was this avid goal setter, and yet becoming the Division I basketball coach had never made my goal list. And the reason behind that is that I didn't want my children to lead nomadic lifestyles. I had loved the roots and the connections that I was able to make throughout my life, growing up in the same town, staying in the same school. And lots of times being a nomad is synonymous with being a college coach. And so that didn't really appeal to me. I just knew I wanted to be around young people, and I wanted to coach the game of basketball, and that would make me happy. And so when the opportunity opened up here in Norman, it was one of those things that you just don't pass up the chance to do and maintain your home. I still live in the same house I lived in when I was coaching at Norman High School. My kids grew up there their entire lives. So that aspect of it was very important to me. And I had a great belief in the people that I was going to work with, in particular, Marita Hines, the senior women's athletic director here. that women's basketball was important and that they could and would give us the opportunity to be successful if we were willing to work at it. And so it really made that a pretty easy decision. The difficult times throughout the years here, 23 years now here at Oklahoma, losing Roz, that's what you alluded to earlier, a key member of our first Final Four team, our national championship runner-up team in 2002. Losing her was tough, and yet a lot of opportunity surrounded that in terms of how we tried to take care of her family and be there for her family and share with her family and with her teammates. And through the years, we have lost our players. We've had players lose parents, grandparents, siblings while they're here, and those are never, ever easy junctures. But they always give you opportunity to teach and to rely on your faith. And, one of the greatest lessons I think I've learned is the necessity of God's grace and how we have to be able to attach to that. And when you get to the point where you can be quiet enough to understand the magnitude of that, it alleviates a lot of the stresses that can build up, and you get overwhelmed and you think, how can I do this? And there's not enough hours in the day, and I'm not strong enough to carry this weight, and the decisions that are in front of me are too large for me to make. When you can get to a quiet place and get in the Word and study and spend that time, you understand the healing and anchoring power of the grace of God, and it's truly unfathomable to us as mere mortals. But it is how, when you anchor into that, you feel the relief, you feel the peace, you feel the strength that you need. Those things are built, I guess I would say, are built from daily being in the Word and being in contact with Jesus. And there have been times in my career when I've been much further away from that than I would like to be. And there are times where I find myself firmly rooted in that. And the difference is amazing in terms of your peace of mind. The difference is just amazing.
Let me go back to the peculiar part of that, because I had a chance to interview both of the Paris twins on a couple of different occasions. And I remember one of them talking about basically an assignment, and you're going to have to give me the details because it was many, many years ago, but basically you asked the players after games to write a little synopsis of their performance, and I'm not sure exactly what you were asking of them in regards to the content, but you would also help them afterward kind of grade whatever they wrote to show them how that could have been written better. So is that something you still do, or was that something you did at one time and don't require that anymore?
Yeah, that's sort of accurate, and we do still do it. So I'll try to explain. It's called post-game thought, and very simply, what we do is they get a sheet of paper and it's divided right down the middle, and it's what did we do well, and why, and what can we do better, and how. And it's really not a synopsis of the game. I don't want to know what happened in the game because I watched it. I already know what happened in the game. What I want to know is what they took away from it. It's an opportunity to reflect, because I believe that that's where the greatest learning occurs, when you reflect on what you just did or went through or experienced. And so it's a time of reflection for them and an opportunity for them to analyze their own play, analyze what happened in the game, and then hopefully draw some conclusions about how to get better. It's part of the improvement stage as much as the next day's practice is. And so it's a really revealing tool. And I'll tell you why. It's obviously the learning that takes place, the deep tracks that it makes in your brain, when you've got to go back and replay things and think about where you hit the mark, where you missed the mark, what you do if you had it to do over again, etc. But also, as a coach, you can find out a lot about what a player understands, about what they're comprehending, about how they feel. I can tell by their handwriting who's upset, who's excited, who's down, who's depressed. I can tell by what they wrote, how they wrote it, how much they wrote, and all of that gave me, or still gives me, information as a coach to know how to best take the next steps with those specific players. Now, the stuff about me making them a better writer, they made a lot of that up because they were terrified to write things down. They thought I was going to come out with a red pen. And occasionally I have to say, I would circle THEIR when they wrote THERE instead. Personal pet peeve, made me crazy. But it was, and still is, a little bit of an opportunity to throw in a communicative piece or two, if you will. But more than anything, it's truthfully, we had a lot of fun with that. We laughed about what grade they were going to get with their grammar, but really it's all about the content. It was a way for me to capture their understanding of their own play and of the game itself.
Well, and my wife is an English teacher, and I know once an English teacher, always an English teacher. So I get that.
Yep, have to put that pen down.
All right, let me go back to last year. And the reason I want to bring up last year is because, Sherri, you've had so much success at Oklahoma. You mentioned the Final Four back in 2002, the other two appearances, in 2008, 2009, and all of the 18 straight years in the NCAA tournament. No, it's more than that. 19 straight years in the NCAA tournament. And so that string came to an end last year with a team that only won 8 games. And so I always wonder how a coach that has had so much success, how they can manage through a season like last season.
Well, it's not easy. I'd be lying if I said that it was. It was a very difficult road. And I think that the thing that happens to you is you get caught up in measuring what the world measures, and that's dangerous business, whether we're talking about what we do in our professional lives or what we do in our personal lives or what we do in our spiritual lives. What the world measures is not always the appropriate metric, and it's hard not to get caught up in that. I completely recognize that my job as the head coach at the University of Oklahoma is to win games. Get it. Totally get it. I also have a responsibility to graduate student athletes and to teach them how to become the best, strongest, wisest version of themselves. And all of those things are important pieces of my responsibility. But when things aren't going well, particularly, the big wide world judges only the outcomes in terms of the final score. And that can get heavy and it can get hard. And maybe the most difficult part of it for me was just trying to keep our team, our very young team, we had 7 freshmen last year, protected from the noise as much as possible. And in this day and age, that's very, very difficult to do because of social media and the constant attack that athletes at the collegiate level are under. They're under constant scrutiny. And so it's really, really hard, especially when they're trying to build confidence, to do that in light of all the things that are coming at them from the outside. And so that part was frustrating for me in terms of trying to protect them and help shepherd them. And yet the year was good because it caused a lot of introspection. It brought me to a point where I had to really look at some things and had to examine some things, and some things were really, really good that we were doing, and some weren't quite so good, and there were areas where we have to improve, and there were areas where we have to be more patient. And at the end of the day, it's what you do with it. What an opportunity. I tell our players all the time, it's not what happens to you on the court, it's how you react to it. It's not the call that's made. It's not the way you're being defended. It's not the shot that you miss. It's what you do next. And this last season provided me as a coach an opportunity to model what you do next, how you use it, how you can learn from it, how you can grow from it, and how you can fail forward. And that's exactly what we're doing.
Well, you probably know this, but the good news is you made it to the championship game in 2002 in San Antonio. You made it to the Final Four in 2009 in San Antonio, and the Final Four is going back to San Antonio in 2021.
I know, isn't that wonderful? Trust me, Jan and I have talked about that a number of times.
Listen, Sherri, thank you so much for your time. This has been wonderful, and I really appreciate it. You're a joy to talk to, and you always have been, and you've always been very gracious for me. When I hosted my own show on the Sports Animal up here, you would always come on when I would ask, and I always appreciated that, and I appreciate you being a part of this podcast as well. And I wish you nothing but the best, and I'm so honored to know you.
Well, Kevin, I just want to say I appreciate all that, but I also want to say that you've grown up quite nicely. You're making Oklahoma Christian very, very proud. So thank you for what you do and the platform that you provide for others.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Sherri.
Take care.
My thanks to Sherri for being a part of Suit Up. You can donate to the KYOW Cancer Fund simply by visiting the website kyow.com. Thank you for listening to this episode of Suit Up. I invite you to listen to others at suitup611.com, and please give us a 5-star rating.